are these people?
We've been following the story of Indie Media Award honoree and friend of the show, friend of the network, Gordon Dimmack. Independent journalist over in the UK, fighter for press freedom for Julian Assange, friend of ours. So what Gordon wrote, and we covered a couple weeks ago, Gordon actually said he was going to, when Palestine Action had the proscription against them, which deemed them a terrorist group and they disbanded, Gordon said he was going to walk into a police station, declare that he supports Palestine Action and he opposes genocide and see what happens. But that he's going to do it with a clear conscience. And we covered that a couple times. Well, here's his latest follow-up, which was 7 words, 14 years. How saying I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action got me treated like a terrorist. So remember, this was about 10 days ago that he first turned himself in at a police station and made that declaration. Well, on Thursday, August 8th, I was formally interviewed under caution by counterterrorism police. This followed my decision last month to voluntarily hand myself in, a deliberate act of civil disobedience in protest at the UK government's proscription of Palestine Action under the Terrorism Act. I had prepared a written statement in advance, which was read out at the start of the interview. All right. And I think that this is the one. Okay, so this is a new one. My name is Gordon Dimmack. I'm a journalist and political activist. On Monday, July 15th, I handed myself in as a deliberate act of peaceful civil disobedience in response to the UK government's proscription of Palestine Action under the Terrorism Act. I believe this proscription constitutes a serious infringement of my rights under Articles 10 and 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights, namely the rights to freedom of expression and freedom of association. I have not committed any criminal act. I have not incited violence. My public statement was, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action. That is the reason I'm sitting here today. 7 words, peaceful, lawful, morally grounded, are now being treated as grounds for suspicion under terrorism legislation. I made that statement as a declaration of conscience. I did not act covertly. I did not act violently. I acted in full view of the public and the police because I believe that silence in the face of genocide is complicity. Palestine Action, to my knowledge, has never killed or intentionally harmed anyone. Their intentions are focused on disrupting the supply chain of weapons used in what the International Court of Justice has described as a plausible case of genocide, to put it mildly. The United Nations, the very institution formed after the horrors of World War II to prevent genocide, is now begging the UK to do everything in its power to stop one from happening. The ICJ has found that there is a plausible case that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. They've already done that. The UN General Assembly has passed. Right. The General Assembly has passed multiple resolutions calling for a ceasefire and an end to arms sales. The UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories has explicitly warned that we are witnessing a textbook case of genocide. Francesca Albanese, who's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize and should win one. And yet the UK government's response has not been to act in line with those warnings. Instead, it's chosen to criminalize the people trying to stop it. It's chosen to brand pensioners, priests, and peaceful protesters as terrorists, not because they committed acts of terror, but because they've refused to stay silent. The proscription of Palestine Action is, in my view, a political move, not a legal necessity. No terrorism charges have been brought against the founders of the group, and no evidence has been publicly presented that would justify meeting the threshold under Section 1 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. In the absence of such evidence, criminalizing support for this group appears to be the criminalization of belief itself, not of action. This sets a dangerous precedent, where peaceful opposition to war crimes and genocide is reframed as extremism, and words themselves are treated as offenses. He says, I've written extensively about these matters on my blog and social media platforms. My views aren't secret. I don't hide what I believe. I act openly, without violence, and in accordance with both my conscience and international legal obligations. I would also remind the officers conducting this interview that the police are bound by the Human Rights Act of 1998 to act in accordance with the European Convention on Human Rights. Upholding these rights, including freedom of expression and freedom of association, is not optional. It is a statutory duty. Of course, we know they're not going to follow that. Criminalizing peaceful speech, absent any evidence of incitement of violence, runs contrary to that duty and undermines public trust in both the law and those who enforce it. By intent. I understand that the officer sitting opposite me may not have chosen this case, and I want to say clearly, I don't view you as the enemy. I know you're doing your job. But doing one's job has never been a shield from moral accountability, especially not during times like these. Across this country, we're now seeing 83-year-old priests, pensioners, and peaceful protesters being arrested under the Terrorism Act. Not for committing terrorism, but for saying 7 words. I oppose genocide. I support Palestine action. Calling elderly citizens terrorists for opposing genocide is not law enforcement. It's political repression. Every officer involved in these arrests should take a moment to reflect on what duty really means. Your role, your oath, is to protect the public, uphold the law, and defend human rights. Those duties don't dissolve when orders come down from above. In fact, it's in moments like this, when law is used to crush conscience, that your duty matters most. I believe that one day these arrests will be remembered not with pride, but with shame. They will be studied, not in history museums, but in museums that document injustice. And I don't say that to provoke you. I say it as someone who still hopes it's not too late to stop it. So I ask you, the person sitting in front of me right now, what are you going to do? When you look back at this moment, will you be able to say you stood for what was right? Will you be able to will you be a picture in a museum, not as a warning, but as someone who took a stand? Because history does not just remember those who gave the orders, it remembers those who carried them out and those who refused to. He says, I'm standing up today because I believe in something bigger than myself, but I shouldn't be standing alone, and you're not. If the law is to have any meaning, then everyone who swears an oath to uphold it, including the police, must also stand up when that law is being twisted into a weapon, which it is. I make this statement in good faith. I will not be answering any further questions at this time and refer to this statement as my full response. So Gordon then writes about his experience, a post-interview analysis, that he says, I exercised my legal right to answer no comment to every one of the 30 or so questions put to me during the interview, with 2 exceptions. When asked whether I'd written the statement myself, I answered yes. And when asked if I supported Hamas, I replied, no comment, Pierce Morgan. My solicitor and I burst out laughing. The officers did not. Do you condemn Hamas? Much of the interview was boilerplate. Have you ever met the founders of Palestine Action? That sort of thing. The only real pushback to my statement came in response to my assertion that Palestine Action does not meet the terrorism threshold. The officer claimed I stated there was no evidence, to which my solicitor clarified he didn't say there was no evidence. He said it didn't meet the threshold. The officer went on to cite the Bryce Norton incident as justification for the group's proscription, meaning the incident of putting paint on the plane, which we covered on this show. But as journalist John McAvoy has revealed, and as Gordon has reported in previous posts, the UK government had already decided to proscribe Palestine Action before that incident occurred. The threshold narrative is being retroactively constructed. I was officially cautioned under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. Allah, Sarah Wilkinson, and Asa Winstanley, and other journalists. The section that criminalizes membership, support, or association with a proscribed organization. It carries a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. He says, let me be clear. I crossed this threshold on purpose, not out of recklessness, but because I believe the law itself is being twisted into a political weapon. That is the real danger, not me or my blog or my words. I didn't do this looking for martyrdom. I did it because I refuse to live in a country where opposing genocide is treated as extremism. Where we're saying I oppose genocide is enough to bring you under police suspicion while arming the perpetrators of that genocide. Get you a seat in cabinet. That's poetry right there. That sentence is fucking poetry. I'm fully aware of the legal risks, including the very possibility that this could backfire spectacularly. I know how the system works. I know how they say, don't worry, only to drop the hammer 6 months later. But I also know that if no one is willing to stand up and say, enough, this machinery of repression will keep rolling over everyone in its path. He says, my conscience is clear. My actions were peaceful, open, and principled. I crossed their line because their line is in the wrong place. And if standing up for humanity makes me a criminal in the eyes of the state, then it's the law, not me, that needs defending. I was allowed to leave without being charged with any offense and with my head held high. So God bless Gordon for that and for standing up like that. Go support him at GordonDimmack.com. Follow him also on Twitter and on TikTok and on Telegram at Gordon Dimmack. Authoritarianism in London also will not get us remonetized by YouTube. So if you're able to and of means, please support independent media by some other means like Cash App, $ Indie News Network, or ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, or over at PayPal at Indie News Network, or at IndieNewsNow.com. That's our news website. At INNnewsletter.com for the network, or at IndieMediaToday.com, which is also houses this show. All right.
Money, please.
Yeah, that certainly does help. And again, thank you to everyone that has contributed. Support independent media because we need it more than ever.
We are out of here.
Mwah. Ciao, baby.
No, we just fucking lost the stream.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say?